Percent of a number. Let's talk about what it means to find percent of a number for a second, because the whole concept may seem strange and foreign. So let's check it out. Let's just walk through this thought process. What happens when you find half of a number? You divide by 2, okay? So if I asked you, what is 1/2 of 40? You would say 20, because 40 divided by 2 is 20. And that's true. Isn't it also true though, because I said what is 1/2 of, that you can use 1/2 and say, well, if I multiply by 1/2, I get the same answer. What is 1/2 of 40? Well, if I say 1/2 times 40 equals 40 halves, which simplifies to 20 over 1, which is 20, then multiplying by that 1/2, that part of a whole, gets me the same solution as dividing by 2. That's why multiplying by fractions works, basically. So keep that in mind. Half of a number I multiply by 1/2 to get that solution. Well, what's the difference if I ask you to find 50% of 40? Well, what's the same about it? Is 50% equivalent to 1/2? Yeah. So if I ask you, what is 50% of 40? Well, we already know that the answer is 20, because we know that 50% and 1/2 are equivalent parts of wholes. But how do we get there? I've already said 1/2 and 50% represent an equal amounts of the whole. And in this case, the whole is 40. We're trying to find what percent, the percent of 40. What is that amount? So to find half of 40, we multiplied 1/2 by 40. So to find 50% of 40, we're going to multiply as well. So let's just we've never done this before, so let's find 50% of 40. Well, 50% of 40, I'm just going to multiply 50 by 40. That's 2,000. Not exactly 20, is it? So this brings up a really, really important point. 50% is not 50. Okay, 50% represents part of a whole. So when we calculate with it, we don't use 50. We have to represent 50% in a way that we know how, as either a fraction or a decimal. Because we don't know what the one whole we're working with is going to do with that 50, we know what 5/10 is going to do to that whole. We know what 1/2 is going to do to that whole. It's going to divide it in half. It's going to multiply by that 1/2. So if I ask you what is 50% of 40, you can't use 50, because 50%, it's not. 50% is half of 100%, right? And 1/2 is half of 1, which is the whole that we're working with. So if our whole is 40, we can't work with 50, because it's not 50%. So anyway, this is the procedure you will go through to calculate what is 50% of 40. You rewrite the percent as either a fraction or a decimal. Most of the time, you're probably going to choose to write it as a decimal. A fraction works just the same. And then multiply to find the part of the whole. So if I ask again, what is 50% of 40? Well, that's 5/10 of 40. Multiply 5/10 by 40. And then when I go ahead and do that, and I work through it, and I put my decimal place where it belongs, the answer comes out to be 20, which we already knew was correct. Here's where I'm going to point out a little bit of a procedural shortcut. But I don't want you to get so hung up on the word that you see the word and that's what you automatically do. It has to make sense to you. When you work with parts of wholes, the word of usually is going to mean to multiply. Always, no. But normally, usually, in problems that are set up like this, yes. We're going to work through tons, though, to help you understand this concept. But this is why. If I said, well, what is 10 of 4? Well, it's kind of weird. 10 of 4. It's kind of like if I have 10 fours, then it's multiplying 10 times 4, and that means that I have 40, right? If you have 2 boxes of 12 items, how many items do you have? Again, 2 boxes of 12, like 2 of 12. I have 2 times 12, which is 24 items. Again, why this kind of works. And then when we break down into fractional parts of one whole, like a percent, find 25% of 12. Well, 25%, I can't use that 25, but I know that if I'm going to say 25% of 12, I'm going to say 25% times 12. And now I'm going to work with 25% as a fraction. I know that 25% is the same, is equivalent to 1/4. So now I'm saying 1/4 of 12, which to me now is 1/4 times 12. And we represent whole numbers over 1, correct? That comes out to be 12/4. And when I simplify that, I divide by 1 using the least common, or greatest common factor, excuse me, which here is 4/4. So I'm going to get 3 over 1, which is equivalent to 3. Let's make sure I've answered my question. Find 25% of 12. Is 3 25% of 12? Yes, it is. So let's find the percent of each number here. 30% of 80. Okay, 30%, I'm going to represent that as 3/10 because that's 30 hundredths. And in my mind, I've simplified that to 3/10. Like how that works? So we're going to say, well, that's 3/10 times 80 over 1. And what I like is we've worked with fractions, so I can go ahead and do that cross-canceling and that quick simplifying method I use. 10 goes into itself once and into 80 8 times. 3 times 8 is 24 over 1. So I can tell you that 30% of 80 is 24. Pretty cool, right? All right. How about B? 38% of 40. 38% is not something I'm as comfortable working with as a fraction. But remember to change a percent to a decimal. I have that little shortcut. And so I know that that's 38 hundredths. 38 hundredths as a decimal looks like this, times 400. So I'm not just going to leave it in that straight line format because I'm going to have to solve it on paper here. So 400, I'm just going to swing this down here, times 38 hundredths. That's going to be 0, 0. 4 times 8 is 32. I'm going to put that 0 in there, and I have 0, 0, and then 3 times 4 is 12. When I add these all together, I have 15200. I have to put in those 2 decimal places. So the answer comes out to be 152. Does that answer make sense? Let's think about it. Well, and I've written down here, estimate to see if your number is reasonable, because 50% of 400, which would be half of 400, would be 200. This is less than 200, about a good chunk less, and 38% is a good chunk less than 50%. So kind of throw those ideas around there and say, yes, I like 152 as my answer. I'm comfortable with leaving it there. How about 200% of 10? 200% means more than the whole. 100% of 10 is 10. So 200%. To change a percent to a decimal, we can say, well, we move it twice. We're technically dividing by 100. 200 divided by 100 is 2. So 2 times 10 is 20. Doesn't that make sense that 200% of 10 is 20? Well, yeah. 200% is double 100%. So 20 is double 10. Perfect. There you go. How about 180% of 90? It's not quite double, but it's going to be quite a bit more than 90, isn't it? Because it's more than 100% of 90. So 180% is like 180 thousandths. If I wanted to write that as a decimal, 180 thousandths, it looks like that. And so it's actually 180 hundredths. Interesting. I didn't mean to mislead you. But it's going to, forgive my mistake. If I divide 180 by 100, I am going to get 1 8/10. That's right. My mental math got a little shoddy on me there. I bet you caught me. And we're going to say times 90. 1.8 times 90. Excuse me. So, if I multiply here off to the side, 90 times 1.8, that is 8 times 0 is 0. 8 times 9, 72. Fill in my 0, 1 times 0 is 0, and 1 times 9 is 9. Let's add them together. This is 2. 9 and 7 is 16. 1 decimal place is 162. So I can say that 180% of 90 is 162. What would 200% of 90 be? That would be 180, because it would be double of 90, just like 200% of 10 was double of 10. Well, this is less than 180, but not by too much. So it's actually perfect. 162 is 180% of 90. Get over there. There we go. So let's see how this applies to us in our real world. This is a geography application, one that I happen to like. So let's think through it together. Earth's total land area is approximately 57,308,738 square miles. The land area of Asia is about 30% of this total. What is the area of Asia? Well, we can say Asia is, so Asia is 30% of the total land, right? And if we think about it like that, well, Asia is 30% of the total land, and we know the total, we fill that in, 30% of 57 million blah blah blah, we just multiply 30% times that total. That's going to tell us about the area of Asia. Love it. So 30% of 57,308,738. Well, 30% is 3/10 as a decimal. So I'm going to say, well, let's multiply that by 3/10. So this is going to take some mental math and some time, but time is always something worth putting into your work to make it nice and quality. 3 times 8, 24. 3 times 3 is 9, plus 2 is 11. 3 times 7, 21 plus 1 is 22. 3 times 8 is 24, plus 2 is 26. 3 times 0 is 0, plus 2 is 2. 3 times 3 is 9. 3 times 7, 21. And 3 times 5 is 15, plus 2 is 17. Don't forget to put your single decimal point in. And you have to go from the decimal point every 3 places, make a comma, 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 okay? And so then you can answer that Asia is approximately 17,192,621 and 4/10. It asks you to the nearest square mile though, so we don't need this 4/10. We can say it's 17,192,621 square miles. And there you have it.